Mom treated me like a maid for years because I looked like my bio dad. Later, when he gave me a pretty big inheritance, she's demanding a share even though she made my life hell. I, 21F, have faced the worst punishment for resembling my bio dad. I'm a result of my mom's affair. My mom was married to my stepdad for 10 years. She had 3 daughters, Mindy, 26F, Cece, 24F, and I, 21F. Stepdad didn't know that I was not his child. As I grew older, I looked more and more like my bio dad, and my stepdad got suspicious of my paternity. My elder sisters looked like mom, so stepdad never questioned their paternity, but when I grew up looking very different from anyone in the family, he ran a paternity test on all 3 children. Mom's infidelity came out. Only the eldest daughter was of stepdad and the rest 2 of our DNA didn't match his. Mom then confessed that the fathers of all 3 children were 3 different men. Stepdad served her divorce. He gave the child support for only his daughter, Mindy, and for Cece and I, Mom had to work hard. Mom loved Mindy and Cece unconditionally because they looked like her. She hated me because I uncovered her truth. As a child, I never understood her wrath on me. She was cheerful and loving with my half-sisters, but with me, she would only be grumpy and rude. I don't remember one happy moment with Mom. The sad part was I didn't know the reason until much later. And when I got to know the reason, I was shattered. The truth made everything much worse. First, it gave me an identity crisis, and second, now I know the reason for my mom's hatred towards me, but I cannot do anything to fix it. Now I couldn't even complain about my mom's indifference towards me. She said Cece's dad and my dad refused to take our responsibilities, but at least Cece looked like mom, so it didn't hurt her to provide for Cece, but I looked like my bio dad and it made her resent me. Mom and half-sisters would gaslight the situation and blame me for their troubled life. I was being belittled openly, not only by my mom but also by my sisters. Mindy called herself the legitimate one. She would call me names and blame me for her parents' divorce. Even Cece would mock me that I looked like my bio dad and I was the reason that tore the family apart. She was like, "Why couldn't you look like mom? That could have saved us from getting abandoned by dad." As if it was in my control to decide how to look. As a child, I grew up hating myself, hating my blue eyes because they had brown eyes like mom, hating my nose, hating my lips, hating my every bit of existence. The indifference continued for ages. I hardly got any new clothes. I grew up wearing Mindy's and Cece's clothes. Mom never bought any new toys for me, and neither was I allowed to play with my sister's toys. I was the unpaid servant of the house. I would have to bring them water and food from the kitchen, drop their plates into the sink, do their laundry, and even make their bed sometimes. The only good thing mom did to me was send me to school. It was a community school, but at least she got me educated. I ran away from home when I was 13, but the cops found me and they dropped me back at mom's. I told them I didn't want to go back home and they would not listen. My mom sobbed in front of them that she was a single mom taking care of 3 daughters and I was just a troubled kid, jealous of my sisters. I listed down all the tortures I have been through. The cops asked me if I was physically tortured and I said no. The cops stopped noting my words. My mom said to the cops, "See, that's why I told you, she is a troubled kid, jealous of her sisters and nothing more." They didn't consider emotional exploitation as a crime. They patted me and asked me to be a good kid and left. After that, mom and half-sisters started hating me even more because I tried to report them to the cops. I can't explain how miserable it was. Staying at home became unbearable. So I took up part-time jobs. I babysat for neighbors, mowed lawns, worked at video stores, and did all sorts of jobs to keep myself away from my toxic family. Working outside was better than free labor at home. By then, I had become rebellious. I was earning money. I stopped taking their BS. I stopped eating at home and got my own food. Life got better after that because now I was able to own some of the stuff that my sisters had, and sometimes I bought better clothes than them. Cece got softer to me after that, but the elder one, Mindy, was still terrible. She would torn my dresses, broke my makeup, and even threw my stuff out of jealousy. I had no choice but to stand there and take it. I wanted to save some money and run away from home, but my boss at the video store advised me to complete my high school so that I could get better jobs. He said his son worked at a recruitment firm and he could help me get a sales job after I finished school. So, I put my head down and studied for my high school. The day I graduated from high school, I packed my stuff and left. I got a job in sales, and from there I picked up and worked hard to make a decent living. Mom wanted me back at home. She showed up at my workplace a couple of times and asked me to move back home, but I refused. It was not out of love but for money. She said that instead of paying rent and living outside, I could pay her the rent and live with them. I laughed on her face. Living there for free was a nightmare, and do you think I'm gonna pay to live with you all? You must be joking. I wanted to meet my bio dad, but mom wouldn't tell me about him. I asked Cece if she knew about her dad. She said mom told her that her dad didn't want to meet her, so better not contact him. Mom had told me the same thing. I was suspicious that it couldn't be true, so I kept pestering her to tell me about my dad, but she is an awful woman and doesn't give in to any sort of pressure. 2 years back, she defaulted on her mortgage and needed money urgently. She reached out to me to borrow some money. I said I would give her the money only if she told me who my dad was. She told me his name and nothing more. I asked for his address. She said he didn't want me in his life, so no point in contacting him. I told her I wouldn't give her the money until she gave me all the details I needed. She then gave me his address. It was like 30 hours by road. If I took flights, I would need 2 connecting flights. I saved up for the flight and then showed up at the address only to find it was the wrong address. I went back home and fought with my mom. I told her I would report her for not revealing my paternal details. She told me that she was reluctant to give me his address because his family didn't know about me and my visit would ruin his life. She tried to guilt trip me into thinking that I was wanting to be a homewrecker. After a lot of fighting matches, this time she gave me his office address, which was 4 hours away. But she kept insisting that I don't visit him because he didn't want me in his life. She was like, "Why do you want to humiliate yourself? He's gonna throw you out. He doesn't want to see your face." I didn't listen to her and took a bus and showed up at his workplace. When I finally met him, the moment was so surreal. I didn't have to introduce myself to him. He saw me and said, "My girl." He hugged me. That was the tightest hug I ever got from my family member. I got to know something that blew my mind. My bio dad was paying child support for all these years. Mom deliberately gave me his wrong address so that I don't get to know the truth. She has been feeding lies to both of us. She told my bio dad that I hated him and didn't want to meet him. It was true that his family didn't know about me. He told me he was married for 40 years and had 2 grown-up sons. He loved his wife and didn't want to mess up things. My mom used that to blackmail him for money and took child support as well. He said we could meet outside and he could even provide for me if I wanted, but he didn't want to disclose about me to his family. I didn't have a good feeling that he didn't want to accept me openly, so I never met him after that. I was disheartened. He sent me several emails after that, but I never responded. Almost 6 months ago, he showed up at my workplace. He apologized and said he wanted to make things up for me. I said he didn't have to do anything for me. I don't need anyone now. I'm not 13 anymore. He said after meeting me he didn't feel good about hiding me anymore and confessed everything to his wife and children. His sons are grown up and have moved out, so they didn't mind it much. However, his wife is in shock and they are seeking therapy together. He handed me a paper which turned out to be an ownership document of a mansion. He said that's the only thing he could do to cover up for his mistakes. I asked him if his family knew about this. He said yes, they knew. He has paid for his sons' college and they are doing well for themselves. He has also left some trust funds for them and a house for their mother. And he gave his mansion to me. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know he was well-to-do. I didn't want his money. Otherwise, I would have also blackmailed him and extorted money for the last 2 years as Mom did for 20 years. I told him how badly I had been treated my whole life because I looked like him. He said sorry for putting me through this. He had no idea that I was going through all that because Mom had been feeding him a different story. He said he was giving the house to me to secure my future and that he owed to me as a father. I was overwhelmed by his gesture. I didn't tell anyone about the house. Off late, I was thinking of getting into a college. I always wanted to be a college graduate, but money was a big constraint. Now that I had a mansion, I thought of putting it on lease and using that money for college. That's how my mom got to know that my bio dad gave me a mansion. She is now running behind me all sweet to get a share in that property. She is gaslighting me by saying that she is my mother and she had to undergo a divorce because of me, so I have to give her a share. When I denied it, she threatened to sue me because she had a right to my bio dad's property. You see, I don't have any understanding of laws and rules around property and inheritance whatsoever. I'm guessing she can't have it, but sometimes the law works in a funny way in the States. I don't have money to hire a lawyer until the lease money comes in. So, if anyone has any idea about all this, kindly help. Yeah, you can call me dumb, but I need help. Thanks in advance. Update 1. Oh, I tell you, money works in a funny way. BTW, thanks for helping me out. I thought Reddit is for fun, but there are some really amazing people who genuinely help others. Like you all said in the comments, my mom can't claim a share in a house that was given to me by my dad. So, the next time she came charging at me for the share, I went nuclear on her. She said she would sue me for this. I challenged her to do whatever she wanted. She cannot do anything except yell. She screamed like a wounded lion. After the last confrontation with Mom, there was silence for a long time. I was not in touch with them. I sometimes bump into Cece. She works in the same block as me. Seeing how my luck played out for me after meeting my bio dad, Cece also forced Mom to reveal her dad's identity. Sadly, her dad turned out to be a German man who had moved back to his country. He used to be our neighbor for a few years. He had rented out a room in our neighbor's house. He was a student back then and knocked up Mom. After he got to know that Mom was pregnant and would ask him for child support, he fled. Cece contacted him through email and he confessed everything. They are in touch, but Cece is sad that she didn't get any benefit after discovering her dad. Makes me wonder if she wanted her dad or hit a jackpot. I hired an agency to get me a tenant for my mansion. 6 days back, someone from the agency called me. He said he brought a tenant to check out the mansion and they found 2 women living there. I was horrified. They said they were the owners. They fought with the tenants and chased them out. The agent told me that he had sent 2 to 3 prospective tenants during the last 1 month, but mysteriously they all ghosted him after visiting the mansion. I asked him to send the pictures of those 2 women. They were none other than Mom and Mindy. I rushed to the place. It was an hour away from where I lived. Without saying a word, I started throwing their stuff out. They tried to stop me and kept saying, "Wait, we can explain. We can explain. Please hear us out." I screamed that I didn't want to listen to the squatters. It was 2 versus 1. It is a very peaceful neighborhood. The neighbors heard the chaos and called the cops. I didn't carry the house documents with me, but the agent had the copies, so he showed it to the cops. The cops chased them out, but also asked me to deploy security at the place. I asked them if I could get a restraining order against them. The cops said it was not easy because Mom and Mindy had no previous felonies registered under their names. It was their first time nuisance, so they can get away with it. I called up my dad and told him everything. Of course, I didn't have the money yet to deploy a security. He has taken the matter to himself. He said he would be installing more cameras across the house. There was just 1 installed until now. He said he would get a tenant for me and that I don't have to deal with it anymore. That was such a relief because I had no idea how tenant agreement worked, etc. I have not heard from the squatters since then, but let's see how long it is going to be like this. I'm sure they are going to come back. I'll update the thread if something develops, but thanks for putting up with me. Update 2. Hello all, sorry for not updating it often. Life has been busy in college. Yeah, a lot has happened over the last few months, let me get straight to it. 2 weeks later to the last incident, Mom and Mindy showed up at my door again. This time they looked miserable. They said they were homeless. Mom lost her job and they defaulted on 2 months of rent, so the owner locked them out. They said they had nowhere to go, so they went to the mansion to live there. After getting kicked out from that property, they have been living here and there, but now no one is ready to let them in. They sobbed and requested me to let them live in the mansion for a month until they put their lie together. I was tired after a long day. I didn't want to deal with them. I told them that Dad was looking after the property now and I was out of this. So, I won't be able to help them. They requested that I speak to Dad and let them in. They pestered me so badly that I lost my shit. Mom was recalling the favor she did to me. She was like, "I raised you for 18 years, can't you do this for me? I raised you for 18 years and this is how you pay me back? This is how you treat your mom who raised you single-handedly?" I screamed at her, "Yes, you raised me, but not as a daughter but as a housemaid. I was no more than a servant for 3 of you. Did you ever get me new clothes or any stuff for that matter? Everything I own was passed on to me by Mindy of Cece. I always got the leftover food. I survived on the stale food of last night while you all ate the fresh food. If there were 3 slices of anything, you 3 would eat and I would just get the side salad or the ketchup. I did most of the household chores, yet you never showed any love or care for me. Even when I was sick, you were mean to me. Only when my condition worsened, you used to get me over-the-counter meds. Once I even got an allergy because of that, remember? It could have been fatal and I could have died because of unprescribed meds, but you cared the least about my existence. This is how you raised me. The funny part is it was not even my fault. How it is my fault that I look like my dad. It's your fault that you cheated on your husband. You got knocked up by random men and I had to suffer. I gave her the yellings of her life. My blood was boiling with rage. The hatred and pain which had accumulated for so many years came out like a flood. They sobbed at my rant. I broke down and howled. They came to console me, but I shooed them away. I told them to back off. They are the ones who have given me lifelong pain. They were still standing there thinking I would cool down and give in to their demands, but I screamed at the top of my voice, "Get out. I don't want to see your effing faces." I cried so badly after they left that I felt sick the next day. I went to the doctor, took meds, and rested for a couple of days. 2 to 3 days later, I was feeling lethargic and bored. I took my car and went around the town for a drive. I passed by my mom's house and found the house was locked and some of their belongings were lying outside. I am friends with one of the girls in the neighborhood. I called her to ask what's the matter. She told me that my mom had goofed up. She had been sleeping with her landlord and the owner's wife got to know about this. She came charging at Mom and dragged her out of the house. Mom was not paying the rent for over a year. She was trading off that by sleeping with the owner. It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone's business. I hate to say this because she's my mom, but this woman is such a whore. Anyone reading this would think it is such a bizarre. Trust me, it's all true. I know this is hard to believe for people having normal parents, but you know not everyone is blessed with a normal family. There are people like us. As I mentioned earlier, my dad took over the responsibilities of getting the tenant for the house. I used that money to get into a college. It's not a fancy one, but I am proud of myself to be able to come this far in life. Meanwhile, my mom tried to seduce my bio dad, but he chased her out and threatened to report her to the cops if she was ever found near my mansion. I haven't heard from Mom after the last outburst. Cece texts me sometimes. I got to know from her that Mindy had also abandoned Mom after marrying a guy from the next block. He was a widower with 2 kids but had a big house and some ancestral properties. Of course, mom has passed on her traits to Mindy. Good for them. Sister secretly hooked up with my fiancé on our engagement night, but my family took her side. 5 years later, she's drowning in debt and is begging me for $75,000. So I, 29F, recently got a call from my mother, who I hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years, saying that she needed my help because my sister and her husband had just been through a tragedy. For context, the man who is now my sister's husband was actually supposed to be my husband once upon a time. My sister, 27F, I'll call her Melissa, hooked up with my fiancé Lucas, 29M, on the day of my engagement. Lucas and I had been together since college and he proposed to me after almost 5 years of being together. He'd thrown a party for us, to surprise me on the night of our engagement, and I still remember feeling like I was on top of the world until around 10 p.m., when I decided to go out into the backyard for a better reception and caught my sister all over Lucas there. They were making out so passionately, that for the first couple of seconds, they didn't even notice me standing there with my mouth wide open. I couldn't believe that he was doing this to me after almost 5 years of togetherness and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally did take note of me, they broke apart instantly, but it was too late. I made a run for it, got into my car, and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel that I could find. I was hyperventilating because I was so shocked at what I had witnessed. I was somehow trying to process it and was willing it to be untrue, but then I received a text from Melissa, saying that she was sorry but she was in love with Lucas, and apparently, this had been going on for a really long time now. I was in the hotel room when I received that text and I broke down like never before. After Melissa, Lucas texted me pretty much the same thing and said that he had only proposed because he felt that if he committed to me, then he would be able to push Melissa out of his head. Obviously, that hadn't worked and it made him want Melissa even more. He told me that it wasn't about me, but this was about them and they just knew that they were meant to be. I was just a placeholder in the way for Lucas to finally meet Melissa. I stayed at the hotel for a couple of days and tried to put my act together because I was still feeling crazy and trying to force myself to believe that this was just a cruel prank that life was playing on me. After almost 4 days, I finally went back home. Because I did need to collect my stuff and rejoin work if I didn't want to get fired. When I showed up at home, I realized that my family had been living with Lucas under the same roof, waiting for me to come back. It would almost be touching, had it not been for the circumstances under which I left. Everybody had been trying to text me and get me to respond relentlessly after I disappeared, but I hadn't replied to a single one of those texts. So needless to say, there was a lot of chaos when I finally came back and everybody made it a point to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Melissa had the audacity to come to me and give me a giant hug with tears in her eyes when she saw me. I was too disoriented to even react to that and just stood there like a silent statue while everyone clamored around me. Then finally, once everybody had calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was back only to take my things and move out for good. Lucas had just been standing there without a word up until that point. But when I said that I was going to move out, he announced that there was no need for me to leave because he'd already packed his stuff and was going to move in with Melissa, since now everything was out in the open anyway. My family, my parents and my aunt, my dad's younger sister who has lived in the same house ever since her husband passed away, actually had wide smiles on their faces even though there was nothing to smile about, at least not according to me. Melissa was standing beside Lucas in an awkward side hug and looking at me very sadly but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to ask my family what the heck were they even smiling about. Because as far as I was concerned, Melissa had just broken up my engagement and stolen my boyfriend of almost 5 years. There was really nothing very funny or sweet about this. My mother chose to speak up at that point and told me that they couldn't go back in time and change the past, but they could accept the future. And they knew that the future had Melissa and Lucas together in it. Granted, it was a relationship that had formed out of cheating and they did feel sorry about it, but they also wanted me to understand and accept that this was for the best. Melissa said that she was very sorry for taking my boyfriend away from me, but she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished that she could have told me earlier and I didn't have to find out this way. But apparently, they were madly in love and wanted to spend their lives with each other. Then the two of them kissed right in front of me and my mother had the audacity to even wipe a tear from her eye. I snapped and told them that this wasn't supposed to be sentimental or emotional and that what they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family seemed to get annoyed with my behavior and told me that I was being too bratty about the situation. Instead of being happy for my sister, I was making this all about myself and they didn't approve of my behavior. I was stunned by their attitude about this and told them all to get the heck out of my house that very moment. I couldn't, for the life of me, understand how they were defending what Melissa and Lucas had done while making me out to be the bad guy and act as though I was overreacting. My father intervened and told me not to act like a child because these things happen and I should take it in my stride. He wanted me to celebrate that my sister had finally found her soulmate, instead of being jealous of her. They were literally all acting insane and I couldn't deal with it anymore, so I just said screw it, went into my room, packed some of my things, and left yet again without even speaking to them or waiting to hear them out even as they called out my name and told me not to go. I really didn't have anything left to say to them because it was very clear to me that they cared more about Melissa and her happiness than about me, or even about what was right and wrong. They were so caught up in trying to justify what Melissa had done, that they completely forgot that I was also a human being, with real feelings as well. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times but I never responded to them because I didn't think that I owed it to them. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas' wedding which I declined, obviously. All the common friends that Lucas and I had also declined the wedding invitation in solidarity with me. And even a couple of relatives who knew the truth refused to interact with my family after they learned how they had treated me in the aftermath of the party. It's been 5 years and I've pretty much cut them out of my life entirely. They occasionally tried to weasel their way back into my life by wishing me on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignored them. I never even blocked any of them, even though I did remove them from my following and friend lists. But since I have a public account, they could see what I was up to. Which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see, and I wanted them to know that I was leading a fabulous life and keep burning with jealousy. It was petty, but it was the least I could do after how they screwed me over. And up until recently, I barely even had a clue of what they've been up to in the last couple of years. My mother called me about 4 days ago from a number that I didn't have saved. When I answered the call and realized that it was my mom on the other end, I immediately tried to hang up, but she begged me desperately for one chance to talk to me because apparently, they were in dire need of help. And I agreed to talk to her for just a couple of minutes, but only because she sounded so upset and my humanity didn't allow me to turn my back on her at that moment. She told me that Melissa and Lucas had started a business of their own a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly and their investors were all backing out because they were failing to make any profit at all. So they borrowed more money, but even that didn't help their business, and now, they were neck deep in debt and the loan sharks were all after them. They were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. My mother knew that I lived a luxurious lifestyle and could afford to help them out, so she had turned to me as a last resort and was begging me to help them out by loaning them some money so they could pay off their debts. And it was no small amount either that she was asking me for. It was almost $75,000 that she wanted me to give her so she could help Melissa and Lucas out. I asked her why wasn't Melissa calling me if she needed help, and why was she making my mother speak to me on her behalf. So my mother told me that Melissa and Lucas didn't even know that she was coming to me for help, as they had given her strict instructions not to approach me. Because I guess we all still remember exactly what happened 5 years ago. Melissa didn't want me to know any of this and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anybody else who would have that kind of money and would give it to them at the drop of a hat. A couple of months had already passed and Melissa and Lucas were struggling to even put food on the table. My parents were helping them all they could, and even Lucas' family were trying to give them all that they possibly could, but it was just not enough. And even they had to be able to support themselves in the future. So it was impossible for them to just give away all the money that they'd saved over the years. Especially because most of my family was retired and so were Lucas' parents. And that's why my mother, with no other options left, had called me to request me for help. Now, I could afford to help them out. But I really didn't want to. Melissa was right for not contacting me to ask for help. They'd lost the right to make any demands from me the day that they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. My mother sounded very upset and told me that I was being cruel and that I needed to think about my family. I told her that Melissa and Lucas hadn't thought about me when they had that affair, and neither did my family think about me while they were supporting the two of them. So right now there was no need for me to think about them either. I'd worked hard to get to the position where I am today, and I wasn't about to just go and drop $75K on two people who didn't even deserve it. My mother then began to cry on the phone and told me that she had never expected me to grow up to be so selfish, and claimed that my sister and her husband would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I said that it was just too bad, but I couldn't help them. And then I hung up. Since then, my mother has been sending me several texts every hour, begging me to reconsider and think about my sister for once. She said that this was not the time for petty revenge and that the trouble that Melissa was in was very serious, so if I didn't help her now, I really would regret it in the future. She's being crazy and I don't understand what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad guy here either. Ida for not helping my sister out financially after she stole my fiancé 5 years ago? Update 1. So I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done that earlier because A, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous of me. And B, because I thought that cutting them off entirely could be something that I would regret, in case something bad were to happen to them, but I don't really care now. I should have removed them 5 years ago. I don't understand why I even kept them around for so long. That is what was petty of me. Refusing to help my sister out now isn't petty, it's just the logical thing to do. They'd already wasted tons and tons of money, and I'm sure that even if I give them the money right now, they won't be able to repay it. And $75,000 is a pretty big amount, so I might be well off, but that doesn't mean I can just drop that sort of money and not expect it back. If this was a close friend of mine who I was helping, I still would expect that money back. And here, these are neither people who are close to me nor my loved ones, nor can I expect them to pay me back. So there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I told a couple of my friends about this too, to get their opinion on it, and they agreed that I'd done the right thing by refusing to give them the money. Not even out of a feeling of revenge, but mostly because it was completely impractical and stupid to even expect me to help them when they were the ones who had screwed me over in the past. But anyway, my mother is blocked now and she can't contact me to guilt trip me anymore, so I have nothing to worry about. Update 2. Hi, guys. So something really big happened today. I was at work when I received a call from my neighbor, saying that there was a couple outside of my house who were screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor told me that they seemed pretty crazy and had been screaming at the door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her for a description of them, but in my heart, I already knew who it was. She told me how they looked, and it just confirmed that I was indeed going to run into Melissa and Lucas when I got back home. My neighbor told me that I needed to come back and deal with this because she didn't think that these two were up to any good. And I agreed when it was Melissa and Lucas that we were talking about, they could never be up to any good. So I thanked her and started driving back home immediately because I couldn't risk them getting into my house at any cost. I got there in about 15 minutes, luckily, and caught them in the act of trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my door. I pulled up in front of my house and asked them what the hell they thought they were doing. And then I tried to call the police immediately, but Lucas was as quick as lightning and he rushed over to me and knocked the phone out of my hand. Melissa also walked over to me and told me that they were here just to talk and they didn't want anything from me, not at the moment, at least. I told them to make it quick and also said that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside, so whatever they had to talk about had to be discussed out there in the yard. They seemed to be okay with that, which was a relief because I really didn't think that it would be a good idea to invite those two inside close quarters. They already seemed pretty hostile, so I didn't know what to expect since they'd said they didn't want anything from me. Melissa started talking and told me that our mother had told her about that phone call and how I'd ignored the subsequent texts from her and then even blocked them all. She told me that the way I was behaving was very unfair and that it had been 5 years since then, so I should really be over it by now. Instead, I was resorting to such silly and dramatic acts just to get a little bit of attention from my family. She said that she'd felt very insulted because of how I had refused to help them, and that's what she was here to talk to me about. She said that she'd been able to arrange the money for now, but there was a very strong chance that she might need more in the future. And because she'd sold their house and all their jewelry to get the money this time, she obviously couldn't do that again. And so she had to know that she could fall back on me and rely on me for help when she needed it. I told her that no, she couldn't and she must not count on me at all under any circumstances because I hate her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I also told her that it was taking me a lot of restraint to not hit her at the moment, so it would be in their best interest to just leave. Lucas had the audacity to say that they weren't going anywhere until I signed a document that would confirm that I would give them money in the future whenever they needed it. I mean, it wouldn't even be valid if I was forced to sign it under pressure. I'm pretty sure there are laws against it. And also, they must be insane if they actually thought that they could manipulate me into signing something like that. I told both of them to get the hell out and Melissa pushed me, saying that I had to help them because apparently, I owe this to them since they were family and I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was shocked that she'd actually pushed me and I was about to slap her, but I controlled the urge to do that because things would only get worse if I got violent. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Lucas knocked it out of my hand and made a run for it. I climbed into my car as quickly as I could and then drove off without even bothering to check my rearview mirror. I hadn't bothered to shut off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running and it didn't take me much time to get a head start on them. Obviously, they were not stupid enough to chase after me on foot, so they just waited there at my house, which was pretty unfortunate. As soon as I was a safe distance away from them, I decided to call the police and tell them what was going on. And then I drove back to my house, just in the nick of time because the police had already arrived within 20 minutes. I filled them in on everything and they arrested and took Melissa and Lucas away. I knew that the charges weren't that serious and they would get off pretty easily. But it was still worth it because at least they were taken away and I didn't have to waste any more of my time with them. It's been a couple of hours since then and I haven't heard from anyone in my family. Which is strange, because I'd figured out that by now, at least one of them would have tried to contact me from some other numbers, but they haven't. So I'm guessing that they're either just over everything and aren't going to try and get under my skin again. Or they're just waiting it out and biding their time so they can contact me later when things are a little less tense. Update 3. Hi. So the last update was about a week ago and I'd honestly started to believe that my family was actually not going to bother me again because I had called the cops on Melissa and Lucas. But I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from disturbing me yet again, and this time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking me if they could speak to me for a moment. This happened yesterday and they seemed a lot less cocky and arrogant compared to Melissa and Lucas, so I let them in. My mother started crying pretty much as soon as she entered the house and told me how sorry she was that she'd ever taken Melissa's side over mine. My father told me that after they learned of Melissa and Lucas being arrested because of their behavior and also that they had physically pushed me, they couldn't bring themselves to look at them the same way and had decided that they were going to cut them off. My mother continued to cry throughout the time that she was here while my father explained that they were apologetic for siding with Melissa in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. While I said that I did appreciate them for finally coming to their senses, but right now it was too little and too late for things to get better. I was used to living my life on my own terms now and I didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. So as much as I appreciated their visit and apology to me, I really couldn't promise them that I would work on this relationship because I just didn't feel that there was any point in trying to salvage an already ruined relationship. Even if it is with my parents. They protested a little at that point and said that we could fix this if we wanted to. But that was exactly where the problem was. I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself, that's all. And I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done here. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually, they left and asked me if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I have unblocked my parents, which feels weird, but yeah, I guess that's. Wife falsely accused me of cheating, but it backfired badly because it was her mom who exposed her affair to me. Now my in-laws want to make me to inherit $2 million, while disowning her. My wife, Nicole, 27F, and I, 29M, had been married for a year, but recently, I filed for a divorce after I found out that she had been cheating on me with one of her co-workers. Interestingly, it was actually my in-laws who exposed the affair to me, and suggested that I file for a divorce as soon as I could. Nicole is the single child of her millionaire parents, who own a massive pharmaceutical company. She and I met on a dating app around 3 years ago and we hit it off on our very first date, so we have been together since then. After living together for 1 year, I decided to pop the question and we got married soon after. Her parents, I'll refer to them as Frank and Leah, were really cool people, and always seemed to like me. In fact, Nicole sometimes used to joke that I was the son that they never had, and it really felt that way because right from the first time that I had met them, they treated me like one of their own. They were very warm and kind people and did not have any airs about them. Even though they were really wealthy, they were always very grounded and humble, and that's one of the things that I like the most about these people. I personally don't have a very good relationship with my parents, and I grew up in a very emotionally disturbed household. My parents didn't love each other but didn't get divorced either because they thought that they had to stay together for my sake. So they would end up fighting almost every day, and neither were they happy together, nor was I. Neither of my parents was particularly affectionate. And even though I am still in touch with both of them now, and they are still married, things are still the same way. Family dinners are almost always an obligation rather than something that any of us actively want to be a part of. But with Nicole's family, it was all very different. Felt like my own people, and I got very comfortable with them very quickly. So I had always known that they liked me, but I never imagined that if it really came down to it, they would pick me over their own daughter. And that's where my dilemma is right now, because they want to make me the heir of their inheritance since Nicole had been cheating on me, and they want to make up for it. I don't know whether to accept it or not because Nicole is pretty furious about it, and at the end of the day, it is rightfully something that belongs to her, and I'm only getting it because she cheated on me and her parents ratted her out. I'm emotionally devastated, but I still don't understand if it would be the right thing to do. And I certainly do want to take that money since it is $2 mil. I had a lawyer evaluate everything and got to know that it's a pretty insane amount of money that I will be taking away from Nicole if I accept my in-laws' offer, so I am really confused about what to do right now. Nicole and I have always had a very smooth and loving relationship. We would have small faith, like any other couple, but we would always manage to be able to work them out. So when my in-laws invited me over to their house, on my own, and told me that they wanted to discuss something very important with me, I had no idea that they were going to tell me that Nicole had apparently been cheating on me with a coworker of hers. Nicole worked for her dad's company and was in charge of recruitment. It was a family business, so it was easier for them to keep an eye on her. And they had noticed that she was spending an extraordinary amount of time with one of their newest recruits. What was really disgusting was the fact that the guy that had been having an affair with was much younger than her. He had just graduated from college and was barely 21. It was legal, but it was just so strange that she, in spite of being happily married, felt the need to go look for love outside of her marriage. They had noticed the increasing closeness between the two of them and had even asked Nicole about it, just to keep them honest, but she reassured them that the two of them were just close friends and were getting along well. That was it, there was no fraternization happening. It was concerning for them as well, because not only was it bad for our marriage, it could possibly open them up to potential lawsuits as well. Because Nicole was in a senior position, compared to the guy that she was having that affair with, and if they happened to break up, he could very well use it against the company and sue them if he wanted to. So my in-laws had asked her several times if there was anything that they should know about their relationship, but she told them that it was strictly professional and there was really nothing more to it. Unfortunately, as much as her parents wanted to believe her, it was impossible, because in spite of their repeated warnings about her friendship with that guy, she refused to back down and would even meet him outside of work. They didn't tell me about it at first because they didn't think it was their place to say anything. It was quite possible that this was a very innocent friendship, but soon enough, things got to a point where her parents felt that they had to intervene. So they did something and hired a private detective to go after her and keep an eye on her. They were pretty rich, so money was not a problem, and they managed to get a professional to do the job for them. On sending a detective after Nicole, they were able to find out that she had been visiting the other guy quite often after work hours. She would tell me that she was out with friends, or she was just at work, and I would trust her, but her parents told me that that was not the case. Every day, she would leave after her workday was over and head over to her partner's house. And then she would spend the next couple of hours there until she was ready to come back home. None of us were stupid. We knew that if she was lying to me, then there was definitely nothing innocent happening in his house. I was heartbroken when I found out because I really loved Nicole and I still do, somebody deep down. But getting to know that she had been cheating on me and had been lying to me for the past few months really broke my heart. This happened about a week and a half ago, and I still remember that meeting with my in-laws and how devastated I was following it. Even the two of them were very upset while they were letting me know about all of this, but they said that they knew Nicole was never going to come and tell me the truth, so they thought that it would be better for them to tell me instead. At the time, they hadn't let Nicole know that they knew the truth, and I had been the first person that they told. I broke down in front of them when they told me about it, and I was very lucky that they comforted me like they were my own parents. They told me that this was not my fault, that they had seen how I treated Nicole like a queen, and this was all her fault. She just couldn't value the love that she had been given by her parents and me and threw it all away for a guy that she had barely even known for a year. I remember staying at their house that day because I just couldn't bring myself to go home and face Nicole, and they were kind enough to let me spend the night at their place. I was very shaken up, and I cried the entire night because I just didn't know what to do next. Logically, I knew that the next step would be to file for a divorce, but my heart wasn't ready to give up on her yet. So the next morning, I decided to go back home before Nicole left for work. I hadn't answered any of her calls or texts the previous night, so it was a bit of a surprise for her when I showed up in the morning right before she was about to leave. I was clearly in a very bad state and she seemed concerned, but I sat her down, and I asked her about the affair because that was the most important thing on my mind at the time. She hesitated for a bit and tried to deny it, but then I brought out the pictures that her parents had shown me of her car parked outside of her coworker's house on the days that she had told me she was working late. She tried to tell me that they were just friends and they were hanging out, but then there was no reason for her to lie about it. So she finally had to come out and tell me the truth that she had been cheating on me with him. The second that she told me that it was true, she had been having an affair, I broke down once again, and this time it was much worse than before. Because when it was just her parents saying it, I still had some hope, and I was hoping that it would not be true, and maybe it was just a misunderstanding of some sort. But after I had heard it from Nicole's mouth, there was no denying it anymore, and I had to accept the fact that she had actually been cheating on me. I was hysterical and I don't even remember what I said to her, but I only remember a lot of screaming and shouting. She had also started to cry, and she was trying to tell me that she was being stupid and had lost sight of what was important because she was feeling a little bored in her marriage, but she had never expected me to find out because it was just a fling, and it didn't mean anything to her. And that made things even worse because it didn't mean anything to her then there was no reason for her to be doing it anyway. The fact that she had ruined our marriage because she was feeling a little bored, just got to me. I remember yelling at her about how I had trusted her and always been there for her, but she had thrown all of it away for some guy that she barely even knew, and I think I continued to shout at her until I had made her dissolve into a puddle of tears. At one point, things got so bad that she was on the floor and was crying with her head in her hands, and I was just screaming at her while standing above her. It was a huge mess, and even thinking about that day made me feel really uncomfortable about the way both of us had been behaving because it was not normal. Nothing about it was normal. But once that ordeal was over, I told her that I was done with her and I wanted her out of the house. She tried to tell me that she was going to break things off with the other guy that day itself and that she just wanted me to give our marriage another chance, but I told her that as long as she was here, I would not be able to think about anything other than her affair, and I needed some time to think. So until then, I wanted her out of the house. There were a lot of arguments because she insisted that we could stay together and work things out. It would be the right thing to do, but at that time, I was still struggling to even come to terms with the fact that she had been cheating on me. So working things out or leaving her was all secondary to me. To make up my mind, first, I had to process everything that happened, and for that, I needed her to be away from me. I didn't even want to breathe the same air as her because I was disgusted by what she had done, and I hated and resented her so much at the time that I couldn't be around her. But she kept refusing to leave, so I got really frustrated and I told her that I would leave instead because I couldn't stand to be around her anymore. She was still upset and said that I couldn't leave because she wanted to sort things out and still stay married to me because it had just been a mistake and I couldn't leave her over something like this, but I didn't even dignify that with a response and just left. I didn't bother to pack anything and I just started driving aimlessly because I didn't even know where I was going to go. It was not until I was really low on gas that I realized that I actually had to spend the night somewhere, so I started driving towards the nearest hotel at that point, and have been here ever since. Things have not been great since then, between Nicole and me. Even though I have tried a lot to forget about what she did, and try to forgive it, I just can't. So last week, I finally filed for a divorce after mulling it over for 3 days. I hadn't spoken to Nicole after I left the house that day, even though she had been trying to reach out to me. The truth is, I don't even have anything left to say to her because what she did was not something I can ever forgive or forget. However, my in-laws have kept in touch with me and have been texting me every single day to make sure that I'm doing fine. I have been in touch with them as well because when I told my parents and tried to look to them for help, they were not very helpful. They just told me that they were sorry about everything and that I should always do what I feel is right, which is just such generic and asinine advice. So it was not going to be helpful, talking to them, and I knew that. They did not even try to comfort me or anything, so I started talking to my in-laws. I haven't told any of my friends yet, but I don't need some emotional support, which is why I have been talking to them. Most people might find it weird, but I am really close to them and I don't think this is wrong. After I filed for divorce and once Nicole had been served, she started texting me even more frequently, but I hadn't opened any of her chats or bothered to read them. I had also muted all her notifications, so it didn't really bother me, but that didn't mean that I had forgotten about what happened. I still hadn't moved on and everything just hurt. To make matters worse, I was also having a tough time at work because I had to take an unexplained leave of absence, since I couldn't exactly go to work every day now that I was living in a hotel in the middle of nowhere and the commute would be simply too tedious. I was almost out of paid leave, and my employer contacted me a few days ago to inform me that if I didn't show up to work in the next few days, then I would be facing termination. This stressed me out even more because I had a lot of major expenses ahead of me since divorce was an expensive process, and I also had to start looking for a new everything, from houses to jobs. And I had been sharing all of this with my in-laws, just conversationally. I didn't actually expect them to help out or anything. But when I told them about all of this, they told me that since it was Nicole, who had backed me into a corner, they were going to fix this for me. I have no idea what they were going to do, but a couple of hours later, they told me that I needed to come to their house ASAP because Nicole was there and they wanted us to talk it out. I didn't have to talk about the divorce, but we could at least discuss who got to live in the house because Nicole could still live with them, but I needed my own place so I could still go to work. I was hesitant to do it at first because I really didn't want to talk to Nicole, but my in-laws convinced me to come over and give it a chance because they didn't want me to lose my job because of this. So eventually, I agreed, and I went over to their place. I was naturally very nervous because I was seeing Nicole after quite some time, but I also didn't want to let her know that I was nervous, so I didn't say anything for the first few minutes that I was in the room. Both of us avoided even looking at each other, and it wasn't until in-laws started talking that we had anything to say. My in-laws suggested that I take over the house because Nicole could live with him, and since they all worked in the same place, it wouldn't be a problem. But it could become an issue for me if I didn't get the house because otherwise, I would stand to lose my job. And that's when something really weird happened. Nicole started saying that she didn't even know why she would have to be the one to make such sacrifices when it was my fault that we were getting divorced. And she told her parents that, as her parents, they should be on her side instead of siding with a cheater. She said that she knew and understood that they liked me, but this was taking things too far. None of us had any idea what she was talking about and just kept staring at her, waiting for her to explain what the heck she was talking about. Her tone was very indignant and full of conviction, so I actually began to think that she might have something to say this time and it might make sense. But unfortunately, she started speaking absolute crap and I quickly caught on, realizing that she was just trying to make me look bad in front of her parents so that they wouldn't side with me anymore, and was literally lying about me right in front of me. So, Nicole actually didn't know that it was her parents who had told me about the affair, so she had probably assumed that I had sent a detective after her to get those photos myself. She had no idea about her parents being involved, so she started making up some false story about me having an affair with a common friend. She claimed that apparently, she had seen how the two of us would always act very cozy whenever all of us were hanging out, and even she had edited some images and brought out photos that made it look like I was hanging out with that friend of mine and doing romantic things with her, like having dinner and stuff. She claimed that she had only had her own affair because she had found out about us and she felt hurt, and apparently her coworker had been hitting on her for a long time. So she just agreed to go out with him as a way to get revenge on me and take things off her mind. But now that it was all out in the open, she told her parents that she expected them to throw me out of the house and cut me off forever. She told them that she didn't appreciate their relationship with me and wanted an end to it because she was sure that I was the one who had asked them to get involved even now, or even told them about the divorce in the first place and manipulated them to believe me instead of her and portray myself as the victim, and had asked them to organize this meeting between us. I knew that she was screwed at that point because she had just dug herself a hole that she couldn't get out of because she had made up a fake story to expose me and get her parents back on her side, which was pretty much the worst move that she could make, given the circumstances. And surely enough, her mother started yelling at her almost immediately and said that she couldn't believe that she had thought that we would always be stupid enough to believe her lies and her badly edited pictures. Nicole was quite taken aback by that reaction. It was clearly not what she was expecting. Her parents told her that they had expected her to be honest, after she had been caught, at the very least, but clearly, they had failed somewhere while raising her because she had turned into a horrible lying cheater. Then, the big reveal happened, and my in-laws finally told her that it was them who had told me about the affair and handed me the photos, so there was no point in lying to them and trying to save face because everybody knew the truth. And boy, was Nicole's face worth seeing at that point. Then, they got into a huge fight, which was inevitable, because Nicole felt betrayed, and said that she hated the fact that they always treated me like their own son, but were willing to sell out their own daughter for my sake. And her parents were naturally very upset that she had turned out the way that she did. They also called her stupid for not being able to realize that they were the ones who had told me about the affair, since they had also confronted her about it before and asked her several times if she had anything going on with that coworker. And she told them that it had occurred to her that they might have told me, but it seemed absurd. Since at the end of the day, they were her parents, and she expected a certain degree of loyalty from them, no matter what she was doing. So they kept arguing for a while and she stormed out after some time, saying that she didn't want to speak to any of us because she was just done with everyone. She was pretty upset and I kind of felt bad for her because I could understand that not having your own parents on your side, that's going to sting. But after things had calmed down a little, my in-laws told me that they had made up their minds, and they said that they were going to change the bill and make me the sole heir to their inheritance, because clearly, Nicole did not deserve it, and they wanted me to have it because they felt like it was more appropriate. It was a huge move, and I felt uncomfortable taking money from them, such a huge amount as well, because I would essentially be taking it away from Nicole. So I told them that I needed some time to think about it because this was a big deal and I couldn't just say yes and be done with it. There were going to be repercussions of this and I wanted to think about it all before I came to a decision about what to do. So I told them that I wanted to take my time and think about it before I said anything, and they agreed. They told me that I had all the time in the world to think about it, but it's been days and I still don't understand if it would be the moral and ethical thing to do. I know that Nicole ruined our marriage by cheating on me, but the amount that I'm going to inherit and take away from her is a lot, and I don't understand if it's fair or not. I have been thinking about it and I am at a loss right now. That's why I'm here. So Wibta, if I agreed to take away my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife's inheritance worth $2 mil? Update 1. Thank you guys so much for all the valuable comments and for being so supportive of me. I am doing fine, emotionally, by God's grace, and I have been talking to my friends about it as well. They think that I should take the money because what Nicole did to me was messed up, and if her parents want to fix the situation by making me the heir to their inheritance, then I should just let them because I deserve it. They also reminded me that not only did Nicole cheat on me, but she also tried to make it seem like I had been the one who had been cheating first with all those pictures and stuff, and her parents might have even believed her if they didn't know the truth. So when it was clear that she would never stop at any length to absolve herself of any blame, then I don't need to go easy on her either, and I think that's a fair assessment of her character. And I have made up my mind. I don't think I need to reject the inheritance because she did not care about my feelings when she was out there cheating on me and throwing away our marriage for a guy that she had barely known for a few months. So there was literally no reason for me to overthink what I was doing. Besides, if she wants to be mad at anybody, then it should be her parents that she is mad at because I don't owe her anything. Not anymore, at least. Update 2. So I finally got back in touch with my in-laws today and I told them that I was ready to accept their terms, and they seemed really happy. They told me that they were glad that they had this opportunity to make things right with me because what Nicole had done was seriously messed up. They told me that after that fight at their house, the other day, she had stopped speaking to them and had blocked them everywhere. She had also put in her 2 weeks notice and had stopped coming to work right from that day itself, and so had her partner. I was shocked that she was ready to give up her job as well, because as far as I knew, my father-in-law was actually grooming her to take over once he retired, so now he would have to look for somebody else to take over. It was crazy because I knew how much she loved her job, and yet, she was willing to give up on all of it, just because she thought that she, for whatever reason, did not deserve to get called out for her actions. I could hear the disappointment in my father-in-law's voice when he was telling me about it, because no doubt, Nicole had screwed up everything for herself, but she was still their daughter and their only child. It was fascinating to me that for my in-laws, it was more important for them to do the right thing and have a spine, rather than pander to their child's wishes. And I have got to say, very few parents in the world will be able to do that and sacrifice their relationship with their only child. I tried to comfort them, but saying things just didn't feel enough, so I decided to pay them a visit tomorrow and spend some time with them because I know that they must be feeling lonely and hurt because of everything that's happening. Update 3. Hey, so it's been a few weeks since I left my house and I have been living in a hotel since then. Unfortunately, I got fired from my job, but the good news is that my father-in-law spoke to a friend of his and got me a much better job in his friend's company. So I guess all is well that ends well. The divorce proceedings have started and things are quite tense. Whenever Nicole and I meet with the mediator, it's very difficult for me to ignore her, but I have to. I know for a fact that she has already started properly dating the other guy and has even moved in with him, from what I've heard. I can't say that I'm surprised, but I am a little disappointed because I thought that it would take a little more time for her to move on from me completely. After all, we had been together for a really long time. But clearly, that means nothing to her. I'm going to try and make sure that it means nothing to me either now. Things with my in-laws are fine, though. We don't speak to Nicole anymore, and neither does she. We try to avoid bringing her up at all because it's a sensitive topic for us, all of us. It's sad, but at least we are a family now. They have not changed their will yet, but they are going to do so after the divorce is finalized and going to make sure that Nicole does not find out about it until after they are gone. We try to meet each other often because we know that we are all going through the same thing and we can only be there for each other and expect it to get better with time. And hopefully, it will someday. Worked for my family business for 12 years, but my dad gave it to my estranged sister and her rich fiancé instead of me. Then begged for my help when they abandoned him after his heart at CK. I, 36F, got kicked out of the business that my father had established, just 8 months ago. For context, I have been a part of the family business for almost 12 years now. We have a jewelry business that was started by my grandfather on my father's side, then it went on to my father, and after that, I expected that it would come to me. After all, I am the older sister and I have always taken a keen interest in the business ever since I was in my teenage years. And my dad always kept telling me that eventually, he would expect me to take over the business anyway. Because my sister, 33F, did not seem interested in having a career, she just wanted to get married and have a family. So if he was going to have an heir for the business, it was going to be me, and it has always been taken for granted. There is no formal documentation of it, but I guess I should have arranged for something like that because I had served as my dad's personal assistant for 12 years. I even quit my first job just after 2 years of working there, since I did not want to come off as entitled and wanted to get some genuine work experience on my own before working with my father, but I left because my dad wanted me to start working with him. And in spite of everything that I had done, I still got kicked out of the business in favor of my sister and my sister's ridiculously rich fiancé. She had not even been part of the family for the past 15 years, since she had made a couple of really bad decisions and my parents had decided to cut her out of the family. Right after she turned 18, she announced that she would not be going to college and she wanted to explore and find herself. That did not go down with my parents, and they told her that she would either go to college or she could leave. They had given her an ultimatum, and she, being the kind of person that she is, decided to leave and move in with her boyfriend at the time. They did not last for long and they broke up within 6 months. Then, she showed up at our doorstep once again, requesting to be let back into the family. Before she had left, she had said a lot of awful things to my parents, like how she did not need them anymore and how she was better off without a family like this. That they were not even good enough for her because her boyfriend and his family were doing much better financially, compared to us. So she had really put us down and completely insulted and humiliated us before she had left, and when she came back, my dad told her that the conditions that he had put forward to her the last time still stood. So now, she had to agree to go to college and get a degree, no matter what she chose, or she could just stay out. My sister tried to argue and fight her way back into the family, but my dad was pretty adamant. So once again, she was supposed to leave, and this time, she said that she was never going to come back again. For the next 15 years, we would only see her at family events, but never otherwise. And whenever she had a life update, we would find out about it from other relatives because she refused to speak to us. My mom and I tried to contact her several times, but because we were still on good terms with my father, she refused to speak to us as well. I have to say, she was really proud, and she stuck to her words. She did not come back until my dad tried to re-establish contact with her himself. She kind of figured her life out on her own, although, not exactly in the way that would have expected her. Like she had promised us, she did not go to college because she just wasn't interested. However, for a few months, she lived with her friend and then, she got a job and started working for herself to fund the life she wanted. I think it was pretty good for her because, along the way, I guess she matured a lot. She switched between jobs pretty frequently, but for the past couple of years, she had been working at an advertising agency. My family knows all of this about her because she did keep in touch with the rest of our family and our relatives would keep us updated, and she knew about it. About a year ago, my dad felt dangerously ill, and we almost thought that we had lost him because he was having a lot of problems with his heart, and the cardiologist told us that it was not looking too good for him until he implemented some serious lifestyle changes. And, during that time, when he thought that it was over, my dad decided to finally contact my sister and end the bad blood between the two of them. And because my sister had grown up considerably over the course of the past 15 years, she finally decided to come back and become a part of the family again. The day that she visited us, she came alone and we did not talk much about her life because we were just too busy reminiscing about the past and she did not want to make it all about herself, so she did not tell us much about everything else that she had been up to, the information that we did not get from our relatives. We knew how she was doing professionally, we just didn't know anything about her personal life. Anyway, she just seemed happy to be back and all of us were focused on the reconciliation between father and daughter. It was a very emotional reunion, and I was happy about all of it back then, not knowing what was about to happen later. When she visited us for the second time, she brought along her fiancé, which came as a huge shock to all of us. She told us that she had been dating her fiancé for the past 3 years and only recently did they get engaged. Nobody else in the family knew about it, which is why we hadn't been able to find out about it either, because they had been keeping it under wraps. The flow of information was not just from her end to us, but she had also known, thanks to our relatives, that our father was having some complications with his health, but she did not know exactly how serious it was, which is why she had not bothered to visit us. And she had thought that it was not exactly appropriate to announce the engagement at the time, so she had kept it private. But now, she believed that it was about time to introduce him to the family and so, she had brought him along. He seemed like a nice guy and I could tell he was pretty well financially off since his clothes, his watch, and shoes were all expensive. I was happy for my sister because I felt like she was finally with the kind of guy that she wanted to be with, somebody who was financially stable, knew what he wanted to do in life, and had his future sorted out for him. After talking to both of them, we got to know that her fiancé, just like her first boyfriend, was also the son of a pretty wealthy man who ran his own chain of fast food restaurants. But unlike her first boyfriend, this guy actually seemed to be serious about her, and we could tell that the two of them were really in love. I was genuinely happy for her and I remember congratulating the two of them. I never thought that my father or even my sister and her fiancé would do what they did. But after about 3 weeks of knowing them, my father suddenly decided that it would be for the best if we let them take over our business as well. One fine morning, he just called me up and told me that he wanted me to come home because he wanted to talk to me about something. I was at work at the time, since I was the one who had been taking care of everything ever since my dad's heart health had declined and I was basically the boss at the time. He just hadn't officially retired yet, but I knew that it was going to happen at some point. At that point, I was confident that I would be in line to step up and be the CEO of our business. But that one day changed everything and all of a sudden, my sister and her fiancé were the ones who were in the running to take over the business that I had been taking care of forever. When I went to my parents' house that day, my sister and her fiancé were not there, but my parents were and they looked pretty grim. After some small talk, my dad finally delivered the crushing blow and I really thought that he was joking about it. But when I realized that he was serious, I just couldn't believe it. When I asked him why he would take such a decision after just 3 weeks of knowing this guy, he told me that he had his reasons and he refused to tell me, but after a considerable amount of arguing, he finally told me that the reason he was handing over the business to my sister and her fiancé instead of me, as promised, was because he believed that they would be more capable than I am. The cherry on top was that he believed that this could be a gift of welcome to the two of them, back into the family. Since they were going to start a new chapter in their life by getting married in a couple of months, they believed that this could be their wedding gift. I tried to convince him that this was a horrible idea because a wedding gift need not be as big as an entire business just because the guy seemed wealthy, and on top of that, he had always led me to believe that I would be the one inheriting it when he eventually retired. I had built my whole life around this fact, and, all of a sudden, he was snatching it away from me to give to people who had nothing to do with us for the past 15 years. I tried to tell him that maybe he could make us partners in the business, and attempt to bargain and negotiate with him because this was my future that we were talking about. But my father was quite firm about what he believed, and he said that he was going to let them take over because he believes that it would be in better hands since my sister's fiancé's father had already built something of his own, and he knew that they would be able to expand our jewelry business twice as fast as me. I begged him for one chance, but he was just not ready to listen to me, and I was literally heartbroken that day. I wasn't upset just because I was losing out on something so big, but mostly because I had devoted 12 years of my life to this, only to get nothing in return. I hadn't even been able to win my father's respect for me because if he had any respect for the kind of work and effort that I had put into the business, he would not have kicked me out. That was the day that I decided to cut all ties with my family because I just had nothing left to say to them. I had expected my sister to at least fight for me, but I was let down by her as well because they gladly accepted their so-called wedding gift, which was my life's work. My sister had always known that I wanted to take over our family business once my dad retired. I had literally been talking about it nonstop ever since I was 13, and all my life, I had looked forward to it. So it wasn't as if she had not known that when she was accepting the wedding gift, she was accepting my dreams and taking them to be her own. She made a post about it on social media to thank our parents for this, and with that, she announced her engagement. After that, nobody from the family even bothered to reach out to me. And I think that was the most hurtful part of all, the fact that they did not even seem to care about me. The day that I had left my father's house argument, they stopped speaking to me, and I felt like I had been used and 12 years of my life had gone to absolute waste. I was just thankful that I had enough savings to fall back on, and for a couple of months, I could afford to not do anything and just try to put my life back together again because I felt like everything had fallen apart. That was 8 months ago, and after that, I started therapy because I could tell that I was spiraling into a depression that needed to be addressed immediately, or else, I don't know what I would have done. And I would feel really sick looking at all the posts that my sister would share, so I had to block her. I also had to tell my relatives that I was not in touch with them anymore, and I did not want to hear anything about them. I literally requested them to not tell me anything that my family was up to, no matter how big it seemed, because I don't think I wanted to know anything about it. And they respected it and kept everything secret from me. So I had no idea that for the past couple of months, my dad's health had been steadily deteriorating and my sister and her fiancé couldn't care less about any of that. It was not until 1 week ago that I found out about all of that when I received a call from my dad, and he told me that he was in the hospital because he had suffered a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night and he wanted me to come to see him in the hospital. I had blocked his phone number, so he had to use somebody else's phone to call me, and honestly, I felt super guilty about it. But then I remembered what he had done to me 8 months ago, and I kind of felt less guilty. Anyway, once he had called me and told me that he was suffering, I told him that I would be right there to see him. And so, I left everything and I went over to the hospital to check him out. My mother and my dad were there, but to my surprise, neither my sister nor her fiancé were anywhere to be found. I found that pretty confusing because as far as I was concerned, they were all really close, given that they were running the family business. I couldn't help myself and I ended up asking them about the whereabouts of my sister and her fiancé as soon as I walked into the hospital room. And my father told me, with great disappointment, that my sister was apparently too busy to come see him. And so was her fiancé. I found that shocking because as somebody who has been running the business for 12 years, it's a lucrative thing and it pretty much works on its own, and unless there is some major crisis to deal with, we don't have to be present at our workplace at all times of the day. At least that's how it was when I used to run things. I can't say anything for how it is now. Anyway, when my dad told me that they were too busy to come see him, I asked him if they had been down there to the hospital to see him at all ever since he had his heart attack, and he told me that they hadn't. He had called them, but they had just texted back, replying that they were too busy and that they would come to see him once he had been discharged. These details were really shocking to me, and I guess my dad realized that he had made a grave mistake by handing over the reins of the business to my sister and her fiancé. So he told me that that was actually one of the main reasons that he had called me to apologize for what he had done. He told me that he was really guilty and regretful that he had kicked me out of the business in spite of all my hard work and effort, but now, he wanted to make things right with me and invite me back into the family and business. He told me what had happened, my sister and her fiancé not showing up at the hospital for him. He had realized that they did not care about him the way he had them. He also told me that this is not even the first time that they have refused to show up for him, and in the past couple of months, they have been sort of disconnected. He told me that after he had handed over the business to the two of them, they had started visiting him less and less. Whereas, earlier, they would be visiting him every other day to check up on him and how he was doing. When his health initially started deteriorating, they did not bother to come visit him and always said that they were too busy at work, which is not something he believes because both he and I knew that nobody was so busy that they couldn't take out an hour from their day. And especially them, given the fact that they lived just a couple of blocks away from my parents' house. Anyway, he never said anything about it, but now, they had crossed a line and my dad couldn't take this sort of disrespect anymore. So he wanted to take his company back and give it to the person who actually deserved it. We had a discussion about all of this in the hospital room and then he invited me to join the business back again and I was overjoyed. He apologized to me for everything and even though I'm still not completely over it, I did forgive him at that time because, to me, nothing was more important than getting back what I deserved. And if, for that, I had to forgive my father, I was ready to do it. But the problem now is that he has had this conversation with my sister as well and he has told her that he wants her to step away because he has finally realized that, even though he has always cared about his daughter, she has never been there for him and he cannot tolerate this sort of disrespect anymore. So he was asking for his company back and was giving it to the person who actually deserved it. And they could look out for themselves. Unsurprisingly, my sister is upset, and for some reason, she thinks that I am the one to blame for this. She called me up this morning and really went off on me, telling me that I am a horrible human being and that she can't even believe that I'm doing something so cruel to her. I don't even understand why she's being so crazy about it. I feel like there is something that we don't know, but anyway, she's acting like she has lost everything and it's all because of me. But truth be told, I think it's her own fault that she did not visit our dad in the hospital. I mean, a cardiac arrest is a big deal and she could have taken time off of work to go see him. She was the one who had been selfish and now, I was getting what I actually deserved in the beginning. And 8 months ago, she had absolutely no problem accepting a gift that she knew she did not deserve, so why should I turn my back on something that I actually do deserve? Anyway, she is pretty torn up about it, and I tried to console her, but she just hung up on me in the middle of my sentence. And now I'm wondering if I'm the bad guy because clearly, every time something happens, I have to take the fall for it and I just feel really tired of this. Ida for allowing my father to ask my sister and her fiancé to step out of the family business so I can get it? Update 1. Thank you guys so much for the response to my post. I kind of knew that I did not deserve the flack that I was getting from my sister, but hearing it from you guys just made me believe it even more. If even strangers who know nothing about our lives think that I deserve the business, then I have nothing more to say in my defense, and I don't even think that I need to. It has been a couple of days since my last conversation with my sister and so far, I have not heard back from her yet. She hasn't blocked me anywhere, so that's a good sign. But I just have this feeling that there is more to this than what she is telling us. Because I don't think that anybody who had a rich fiancé would act that way on losing out on our business. I can't say for sure, but I have a theory that maybe all is not what it seems to be with her fiancé. Some of you had asked me about this in the comment section of the original post, but I did not say anything about it because I did not think that was relevant at the time. But now, I don't think that her fiancé and his family are doing well financially right now. Because from what I have heard, his dad's company is facing loss after loss and they have been unable to recover for the past year or so. And I think that this was their way of sneaking into our family business and then taking over eventually. I haven't been able to figure out why exactly my sister would behave the way that she did when she got to know that I was being asked to rejoin the family business and she was being asked to step out. If she has a rich fiancé who has her own company, she has nothing to worry about. And yet, she was devastated. Something just did not add up and I think she's going to come around and tell us about it pretty soon. Anyway, we are just lucky that my father did not sign any documents or contracts and did not officially hand over the business to my sister and her fiancé because that would have caused a lot of trouble for us. He was still the CEO. They were just working under him in the position that I had previously. He was training them to take over eventually, but now, I don't think that's gonna happen. I have spoken to my father and he told me that my sister is very upset, but he can't afford to care about that right now. His only priority is to just sign over everything to me and then, I can handle it all. So that's what he's going to do. He's already speaking to a lawyer and having the papers drawn up, so I can take over as soon as possible and it can be made formal and official. I'm really just very excited and I don't even think that my sister's dramatic outbursts can put a damper on this for me right now. Update 2. Hi, so it's been a couple of weeks since my post here and I just wanted to tell you guys that I am officially the new CEO of my dad's jewelry business. The handover is complete now and I am officially one in charge, which feels so good to say. I knew that this day was going to come, but there were a couple of delays in the process because of my sister. Coming to her, she is absolutely not happy about any of this and I guess I can finally say it now, my theory about it was true. She and her fiancé were actually, very cleverly, trying to sneak their way into our family business and take over so that they would have something to fall back on when her fiancé's father finally let go of his company. It was my sister who had planted the idea of welcoming them back into the family by handing over the business to his future son-in-law and my father's head, and he had unfortunately fallen for it. I only discovered all of this recently, after reconnecting with my father, and he told me that he was not thinking straight. He was being greedy because he had believed that for some reason, a man from such an established business family would be better at handling everything than I would be. He had originally intended on retaining me in the position that I had been working in so far, but when I told him that I was not interested in the business if I did not get to be the head of the company, he lost his temper, and that led to these 8 months of absolute misery for both of us. Thankfully, he came back to his senses in the nick of time and we were able to avoid a huge disaster. Because right now, the credibility of my sister's fiancé and his father in the market is absolutely zero. I had been hearing from people about rumors of his father's business being on the verge of getting shut down, but I hadn't believed it because I was sure that my dad would reach out to me if something like this was about to happen. And my father had thought I would reach out to him if something of this magnitude was going to happen. And so, neither of us reached out to each other. Which was pretty foolish of us, but anyway, now my sister herself has confessed what she was trying to do and kept her ego aside to speak to me. She reached out to me a couple of days ago, just before it was finalized that I would become the CEO, and she told me that she and her fiancé desperately needed jobs because they were not sure of how many more days his dad would be able to stick it out. So now, she was asking me for help and I told her that I would think about it. I don't have an issue with hiring them, it's just that I will never ever be able to trust them again because I knew what their original intentions were. So that's what I'm kind of feeling weird about right now. I do want to help her out, but at the same time, how can I even hire people whom I don't trust? Anyway, I told her to give me some time and she has agreed to do that so far, but I don't know what I'm gonna do. Update 3, hey, so I have decided not to hire my sister and her fiancé. I know this will probably make me seem really selfish to some people, but honestly, I can't trust these people. When my dad had offered them to take over the company at first, they had accepted it and they haven't even bothered to reach out to me for the next 8 months. They had absolutely zero compassion or empathy for anybody apart from themselves, and I don't want people like that around me or working for me. So with a heart, I had to tell my sister that I couldn't help her out. Obviously, she did not take it too well. She showed up in my office the other day and threw a tantrum, accusing me of being heartless and selfish, and she told me that she regretted ever even letting me have the company back. I thought that was weird because she did not have any part to play in that. It was my father's decision because he was the head and whatever he said. It was not my decision and right now it is not her decision. So for her to act as if she did a huge favor to me was just ridiculous. I would have tolerated all of that, but that statement just really annoyed me. So I told her that she did not do me any favors, not now and even previously, she did not seem to care about me. So it's pretty stupid of her to expect me to do the same for her. I asked her politely but she refused and kept screaming at me. She was totally undermining me, so I decided to call the police and have her escorted out because I couldn't deal with this level of drama. I'm already pretty busy with work and I just don't need this right now. But then once the cops showed up, she did not have much to say and just left. It has been a few days since then, and we haven't heard back from her, so I am assuming that she should leave us alone. And even if she doesn't, I don't care because I'll get a restraining order against her.